Dusk was approaching when 3 dark SUVs pulled into my driveway. The vehicle doors swung open simultaneously, and 6 men emerged wearing tactical gear with badges catching the dying light. A tall, stern-faced man led the group, gripping a document folder, while Nancy, the wannabe president who'd been tormenting me for weeks, stood behind him with crossed arms and a satisfied grin. "You violated HOA rules," the man declared. "We're here with authorization to evict you." Nancy believed this was her winning move. She expected to witness my forcible removal from my own home. She was unaware that the officer exiting the following patrol car was one of my people, and the events about to unfold would not only reveal her fraudulent scheme, but demolish an entire criminal network. Before continuing, hit subscribe to receive more incredible HOA tales like this one. When you purchase a home, you anticipate a particular tranquility, that sense of control over your property and your decisions. I dedicated my whole life to reaching this milestone. Following years of renting, relocating for jobs, and dealing with overbearing landlords, I was finally independent, or so I believed. On moving day, I'd hardly begun removing boxes when I spotted her, Nancy. She positioned herself across the street, arms folded, clipboard held like a sword. Her short blonde haircut and pressed blazer represented the standard outfit of every self-important busybody. Her piercing stare shifted between my residence and my moving vehicle, her lips forming a tight line of disapproval. I offered her a courteous nod, which she ignored, choosing instead to continue staring. This served as my initial red flag. The following morning brought the second warning. I emerged outside, stretching in the dawn light, only to discover a bright red violation slip attached to my front door. Frowning, I removed it. "Who argeta to NEDD? Violation 1. Unauthorized mailbox style. Violation 2. Non-conforming landscaping. Violation 3. Failure to register with OA. I gazed at the document, blinking incredulously. I hadn't even finished unpacking my kitchen items yet, and I wasn't even part of an HOA. I reviewed my buying paperwork, no association mentioned, no contracts signed. So I did what any sensible property owner would. I crushed the notice and threw it away. That was a major error. That afternoon, I heard high heels tapping on my driveway. I turned to see Nancy approaching, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone artificially sweet while her face remained hostile. "I trust you received the notice." I wiped perspiration from my brow, putting down a box. "Yeah." Her lips twitched. "That wasn't optional." I lifted an eyebrow. "That's amusing, since I never joined an HOA. Nancy's grin widened. "Your street became part of our association last year, so yes." I laughed briefly. "You can't simply vote people into an OA," she shrugged. "We already did." I moved closer, voice firm. "I never signed documents. I don't owe you or your board anything." Nancy's face grew cold. "You will follow the rules," she snapped. "Refuse and we'll take this higher." I crossed my arms. "Higher to whom?" She raised her chin. "The authorities." I studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Go right ahead." Nancy's eye twitched. She'd anticipated pushback, not complete defiance. She spun around and marched off. An hour later, 3 additional violation notices decorated my fence. The following day, my mailbox overflowed with HOA warnings. The day after, a $500 penalty for non-compliance appeared on my door. I chuckled and tossed it directly into the garbage. But that evening my security cameras captured something intriguing. Nancy with a flashlight, photographing my house. She wasn't merely harassing me, she was constructing evidence. That's when I realized this battle was far from over. Nancy believed she held power. She assumed I'd surrender and comply, but she was clueless about her opponent. Nancy wasn't simply determined, she was ruthless. The next morning I stepped outside anticipating another absurd notice. I wasn't let down. There it was. I scanned the details. Apparently my front door was an incorrect shade of brown. I released a slow, disbelieving laugh. This wasn't about regulations. This was about dominance. I disregarded it. Another big mistake. That afternoon, while unloading boxes from my vehicle, I noticed 2 men in reflective vests positioned in my driveway making notes. They weren't city workers, contractors, or anyone who belonged on my property. I approached, arms folded. "Need something." "One barely HOA inspection, sir." I scowled. "You're trespassing on private land, leave now." The man smirked. "Not based on HOA documentation." That's when I saw the patches on their sleeves, Neighborhood Compliance Officer. A meaningless title. I stepped forward, voice quiet. "I'll only tell you once, get out." The second man appeared uncomfortable, but the first just grinned. "You'll be sorry." They departed, but I knew this wasn't finished. That night, my electricity mysteriously failed. The next morning, I discovered my mailbox destroyed and my car scratched. I contacted police, but they said no evidence connected it to the HOA. That's when I understood I wasn't merely facing an irritating HOA. I was confronting criminals, so I began investigating. I visited the county clerk's office searching for official OA records. What I discovered, no HOA existed. Nancy's organization wasn't registered and had zero legal power, but that hadn't prevented her from collecting payments, issuing penalties, and even threatening foreclosure. I spent the following days speaking with neighbors, collecting information. What I learned, Nancy's scheme had operated for years. Most homeowners, exhausted by the harassment, had simply paid. Some had even sold their homes just to escape her. She wasn't merely a power-hungry control enthusiast, she was a fraud artist. And those so-called neighborhood compliance officers, they weren't just HOA enforcers, they were her muscle. That afternoon, I marched directly to Nancy's door and knocked more forcefully than needed. She opened it with her typical arrogant look. "I wondered when you'd visit," she said, leaning on the doorframe. I displayed the documents. "Your HOA is fake." She barely reacted. "How adorable." I stepped forward. "You're operating a con, I have evidence." "This stops now." And Nancy sighed theatrically. You can resist if you choose, but it won't go well for you. She tilted her head slightly, and I noticed we weren't alone. 4 men stood behind her. The same compliance officers from before. Nancy folded her arms. You should reconsider your strategy. I wasn't the one needing to reconsider, because Nancy was oblivious to who she was attempting to intimidate. Nancy wasn't simply operating a fraudulent HOA. She was managing a business, a scam, a sophisticated, highly organized extortion scheme disguised as a community group, and she'd been succeeding for years. The instant those fake compliance officers appeared in my driveway, I knew I wasn't merely dealing with a nosy neighbor on a power trip. This was something much larger. So I began digging deeper. I spent the next few days speaking with neighbors, collecting every piece of proof I could find, and what I discovered, Nancy wasn't just some self-appointed neighborhood dictator. She was operating a complete criminal enterprise. Most of my neighbors had been paying hundreds, even thousands in HOA fees, not willingly but from fear. When they refused, odd things occurred: broken windows, slashed tires, mysterious electrical problems in their homes. Nancy and her associates had been intimidating and terrorizing homeowners for years, and nobody could fight back because whenever someone challenged her, she overwhelmed them with fraudulent legal threats. HOA eviction papers, property liens, even fake foreclosure letters. The worst part, it worked. Some families actually relocated, selling their homes below market value just to escape the horror. Nancy wasn't just running a scam, she was stealing property. And those so-called neighborhood compliance officers, they weren't just HOA enforcers, they were her enforcers. That night I strengthened my security system: additional cameras, floodlights, motion detectors. At 20:14 a.m. my phone alerted me. I checked the footage. 2 men stood in my driveway, dressed in black. One pointed at my house while the other retrieved something from his pocket. I grabbed my weapon and went outside, looking for something. They turned. One shoved something into his jacket. Routine compliance inspection, one said. I smirked. 8:02 a.m. They didn't respond. Leave. They didn't argue, but I knew this wasn't over. The next morning, I appeared at Nancy's house, knocking more aggressively than necessary. She opened the door, looking entertained. I wondered when you'd visit. I held up my phone. Security footage. Your men trespassing on my land? She barely glanced at it. Perhaps they were ensuring you weren't violating rules. I moved closer. You're running a con, Nancy, and it ends today. She sighed dramatically. You keep claiming that, but let's face facts, you're outnumbered. I stared at her, waiting for her to discover just how mistaken she was. Nancy wasn't merely scamming the neighborhood. She'd constructed an entire system to enforce it, and when I confronted her, she summoned her officers to arrest me. I expected Nancy to continue escalating, more penalties, more fake notices, perhaps another midnight trespasser with a flashlight. But I wasn't expecting this. 3 black SUVs arriving at my house in broad daylight, engines running, windows tinted dark. The doors opened simultaneously like a choreographed performance, and then I saw them: 6 men in black tactical vests, utility belts, fake badge attached to their chests. Nancy stood behind them, arms crossed, her smirk broader than ever. This wasn't an HOA disagreement anymore. This was intimidation, and she'd come to send a message. One of the men, taller than the others with a square jaw and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward. He carried a document folder like it was an arrest warrant. You've violated HOA regulations, he announced. We have authorization for your removal. I raised an eyebrow. Authorization? He nodded, opening the folder of nonsense. You're ordered to leave the premises immediately. Nancy stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. We offered you numerous opportunities to comply, she said, shaking her head. You selected this path. I remained quiet, examining the so-called officers. Their uniforms were wrong, their badges mismatched, their movements too rehearsed, like actors in a cheap movie. Nancy wasn't just operating an HOA scam. She'd employed fake law enforcement and expected me to believe it. I suppose resistance would be unwise, the leader smirked. That would constitute obstruction. I nodded. Right. Just one thing before I leave. I reached into my pocket and produced my badge. I'm the police chief. Silence stretched long and heavy, like someone had muted a film. One of the fake officers stepped back. Nancy's smirk disappeared. The leader's eyes darted to her. Is this some joke? I stepped forward. No, but impersonating officers is a felony. A slow change rippled through the group. They'd lost control. Drop your weapons, I said, voice steady. Hands visible. Nobody moved. Then, from down the street, sirens. Nancy's face went pale. Squad cars screeched to a halt. My officers emerged, weapons drawn. One of the fake cops attempted to flee. He didn't get far. Nancy believed she'd won. She thought her fake cops could intimidate me. But now she was the one getting arrested. The moment my officers exited their cruisers, the fake cops lost their courage. One bolted. He made 3 steps before Lieutenant Reynolds tackled him. The others weren't foolish enough to attempt escape. Weapons clattered on the pavement. Hands. Nancy just stood frozen. Reynolds adjusted his belt as he approached, eyes scanning the scene. What exactly are we dealing with here, Chief? I smirked, still holding the phony arrest warrant they'd tried to serve me. Attempted unlawful arrest, trespassing, fraud, impersonating law enforcement. Take your choice. Reynolds whistled low. Quit the show you've got here. Nancy snapped back to reality, her face twisted with fury. This is an error. I did nothing wrong. I turned to her, raising an eyebrow. You employed fake cops to force me from my own home. That's not just wrong, it's criminal. Nancy's jaw tightened. I had no involvement in this. I held up the phony warrant. So these men just magically appeared at my door with fraudulent documents. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time she was speechless. Reynolds pulled out his radio. Dispatch, we need transport for multiple suspects. Fraud, impersonating law enforcement, conspiracy to commit felonies. Nancy stiffened. She whirled toward the remaining fake officers. Do something. They just stared at the ground. One muttered, we were just following your orders. Nancy turned back to me, desperate now. You don't understand, this is all a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding, I repeated calmly. I waved at my officers. Search her residence. Nancy physically recoiled. You can't do that. One of my officers held up a warrant. Actually, we can. Nancy wasn't just caught, she was trapped. I watched as my team moved past her, entering her home. Barely 2 minutes later, one emerged with a thick folder. He handed it to me. I opened it, and that's when I saw it: bank records, property liens, funny legal documents. Nancy hadn't just been scamming homeowners, she'd been operating this across multiple neighborhoods. Tens of thousands in fake HOA dues, bogus fines, even fraudulent property sales. Nancy wasn't just a scam artist, she was a career criminal. Nancy attempted one final time. This is all an error. I was simply trying to maintain community order. I gave her a long look. Nancy, let me ask you something. She swallowed hard. What? I leaned in slightly. Who gave you the concept for this scam? Her eyes looked away, because Nancy wasn't the mastermind, she was just a piece, and when I investigated further, I discovered exactly who had been controlling the operation. Nancy sat in the squad car's back seat, muttering to herself, wrists cuffed behind her back. But I wasn't finished yet. One of my officers approached, handing me files pulled from her office. I reviewed them, and that's when I saw it: Nancy wasn't controlling the strings. The fake OA wasn't just a scam, it was part of a massive real estate fraud network, and at the top of the documents a signature from a city official. Nancy had been collaborating with someone inside the system. That explained everything: how she accessed homeowner records, how she got away with stealing from people for years, how none of her victims could fight back. She had a powerful ally, and now they were next. I handed the file to my lieutenant. Get a team on this, we're bringing them all down. The following week was a comprehensive investigation. We raided multiple properties, seized millions in assets, arrested additional board members, fake officers, and corrupt officials. Nancy betrayed them immediately, throwing her partners under the bus for a reduced sentence. It turned out this scheme had operated for over a decade: fake OAs, forged property deeds, illegal foreclosures, all orchestrated by a corrupt city administrator who'd been protecting Nancy the entire time. By month's end, dozens of arrests were made, the scam dismantled, the neighborhoods that had been under Nancy's fake HOA control finally liberated. A month later, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching my actual neighborhood enjoy its restored peace. Then a letter arrived from the Genuine Homeowners Association, and what they had to say transformed everything.